Taking the scale and astonishment of Shoutout the Colossus, with the strategy and sometimes intensity of Monster Hunter, Eternal Strands is a stellar way to kick off the new year. With a heavy focus on combat and upgrading your equipment, the player is constantly met with new challenges to keep the encounters dynamic and refreshing, but is also backed by a story that's engaging and characters that are riveting to talk to. Hey there, I'm CGDannyB and I really like indie games. I like sharing them with you guys. And right now you're watching my review of Eternal Strands by Yellow Brick Games. First off, I gotta give a huge shout out to the team for setting me up with the review key way back in December, which is easily the best Christmas gift that I got this year. Sorry mom, I still really like the battery pack you got me for my Switch. Now before we get into what you came here for, this is my first standalone review for 2025, but it is far from the last. So be sure to subscribe so you can continue to hear about the latest and greatest indie games out there. Also, be sure to like the video, because if you don't, a giant metal robot's gonna slip and fall on top of your car. And if you don't have a car, then it's gonna be your neighbor's. Then you gotta listen to them complain about it. So do yourself a favor and like the video. And with that out of the way, let's talk about Eternal Strands. The journey of Eternal Strands kicks off with Bryn, our fearless protagonist whose wit's as sharp as her blade. As a proud member of the Weavers, a band of daring adventurers driven by curiosity who like to combine weaponry with magic, she sets out into a world teeming with untold mysteries and some big-ass monsters. Together they'll weave stories of courage, uncover secrets lost to time, and chart a course through the unknown. Okay, yes, there was a lot of wordplay in there, but basically strong girl beat up big monster for loot. After being chased down by a magical storm, you'll find yourselves in a small alcove where you'll set up your base camp and figure out how you want to get yourselves out of here. As you explore the various sections of the Enclave, you'll discover more about the history of this area, giving you a deeper perspective into the people surrounding you, as well as some things that they probably wish stayed in the past. Throughout my roughly 42 hours of Eternal Strands, I was continually met with entertaining and enthralling conversations with the collection of lively and badass characters who were joining me for this adventure. Okay, well maybe not joining me, more like telling me what to do and hoping that I don't get crushed to death while doing it. And let me tell you, I love the cast of this game. Like just a few examples of the other Weavers that you'll be chatting it up with, there's Sebastian, this really cool looking bear, walrus, yeti dude who's pretty quiet at times, but has the heart of gold. Araya, the recently injured adventurer who doesn't do a whole lot but stand around and tell you what to do, but like in a nice way. Plus they're a dope ass bird person and teleport you back to safety when you die. You've got Sola, the dope blacksmith who makes me safe with armor and weapons, and then her husband Dom, the smart dude who's making my magical toys. Now, I am a comfortably heterosexual man, but if I happen to have my bisexual awakening this year, this man started it. And this is merely just scratching the surface of the cast in Eternal Strands. Some are a bit more story heavy, so I'll let you discover them on your own. Now, Eternal Strands is filled with voice acted dialogue that I'm sure many of us will enjoy, but also I know some of us don't love to be bogged down with a butt ton of talking. So don't worry, you can skip it all as well, just in case you're here for the monster hunting. And speaking of which, once you and your party find yourselves settled in and cozy in your section of the Enclave, you're now tasked with exploring the new regions of the wild and bringing some gigantic monsters to their knees. Or beaks. I don't know if birds have knees. This is the bread and butter of Eternal Strands. An open world for you to investigate, secret locations for you to wander into, and of course, some arcs to fight. Once you discover a new location, your first goal should be to find one of the various gates that you'll use to fast travel back and forth to your camp and other locales. Unfortunately, it's very likely that the Arcs are going to find you first. The Arcs are the colossal titans that are guarding the Enclave. Every new area that you uncover will introduce a new boss encounter that you're going to have to figure out how to defeat. And sure, after spending nearly 2 days worth of gameplay practicing the art of arc hunting, I could take these suckers down in no time at all. But the first time you meet one of these big guys, it may take you a minute to get over the fact that a huge dude with ice knuckles is trying to pulverize you into dust particles. You'll most likely spend your early hours of the game acting like a pesky bug to these guys, poking them in the leg and biting the back of their necks until their health finally hits zero. Just be warned, they each come with their own kind of fly swatter as a bit of a deterrent. However, the process of learning how to defeat these ridiculously giant beasts was so much freaking fun. Climbing up their legs as they try to punt me across the forest, or jumping off of rooftops and trying to grab their faces as they shoot fireballs at me was so exhilarating. The constant need to run around the map looking for health as our 9-story buddy shook the earth behind me had me on the edge of my seat for the majority of my playtime. What originally started as a fear-filled chase scene eventually became a skill-based challenge of knowing where to go, what to grab, and how to trick these big goobers into letting me wreck their faces. Now, all this is much easier said than done, so let me tell you how you're expected to accomplish victory over these dudes. The big thing with Eternal Strands is that the world is your weapon, and though that's very true, we gotta start somewhere. In this game, you'll have 3 types of weapons. You'll start with the sword and shield as well as the bow and arrow, and then eventually unlock the 2-handed melee weapons. After finding the weapon blueprints hidden around the Enclave, use the materials that you've collected while hunting and exploring the world to craft them with Sola. Each type of weapon comes in 4 styles: standard, fire, ice, and kinetic. And these 3 elements will enhance your kit, making you a devastating force of nature, from freezing foes in place to setting their toesies on fire. Each weapon will do elemental damage as well as come with a signature effect or move. Some will create a giant ring of fire, while others will spawn a kinetic energy bubble that drags in enemies and explodes. And depending which materials you use to craft a weapon, you'll get increased damage, fire resistance, ice resistance, or a bunch of other buffs. And if you think you made a mistake along the way, you can always go back and reforge your weapon later, using new materials that you found for different buffs. But hold on a minute, bucko. Those magical powers aren't just in your weapons, but they're at your fingertips as well. Or, I guess around your neck. You also have access to your mantle, a scarf that allows you to swap between 9 different magical powers as you unlock them by defeating arcs, which we'll talk about in a moment. Combine the effects of your weapons and your mantle to create some nasty moves, like creating giant ice explosions or throwing burning rocks at your enemies. Or just use your kinetic powers to pick up all the robots and toss them off the map, over and over and over again. Both strategies are equally effective. But anyway, let me get back to talking about fighting the arcs. So if you want, you can just go out, defeat an arc, collect the materials, and move on. But that honestly won't make you any stronger. What you need is their strands. Each boss you encounter has a secret way that you need to deal damage to them, which will expose a specific location on their body, allowing you to rip the strand right out of them. And these strands are used to unlock and upgrade your spells in your mantle. And usually you can tell which spell it's going to be based on the attacks of the arc that you're fighting. After defeating each arc in a special way, Dawn will give you a new side quest for each one to collect more strands from the specific beast, which you'll need to do 3 times each to fully upgrade all of your mantle spells. For example, one of my favorite arcs in the game is the Arc of the Living Flame. Little bit of spoilers here, but to get his strand, you have to break all the jewels on his body, which will then extinguish the flame on his head, allowing you to climb up and rip it out of his skull. It's going to take some practice to figure out where all of his weak spots are and how to get him effectively while he's throwing fireballs and sending his inferno babies after you. But once you get it figured out, it is so cool to climb onto his head and watch the final moments of him marching around this old Colosseum before collapsing to the ground in defeat. Now, I couldn't tell if this was a performance issue with my PC or if the game is currently like this, but there's this slight pause in between you completing the strand extraction and the arc actually dying. So sometimes if you try to extract the strand without doing enough damage, they'll shake you off and launch you across the arena. So I couldn't tell if I succeeded or not, which occasionally would take the wind out of my sails just a smidge. But that aside, taking the time to try and understand the ins and outs of each of these encounters was an enjoyable puzzle that needed to be solved for me to perform the best that I could. For some bosses, it's pretty easy to piece together what you have to do. But for others, you're probably gonna have to go through the battle a time or two to understand what exactly is needed from you. Or, if you don't like experimenting, after you defeat the arc once, with or without the strand, your Chronicler Lane back at the camp will put together a document of their research, telling you all that they know about defeating the arcs. So it's basically an in-game game facts for each arc. So that's pretty swell. In between fighting some cool monsters and progressing through the story, Eternal Strands gives the player the option for a bunch of character-based side quests. Most of these side quests are going to revolve around the other members of your party and what they've got going on in their own lives. The majority of these side quests are going to turn to you either fetching items from them out in the Enclave or playing telephone with your other friends. So they aren't always the most engaging when it comes to gameplay. Typically they're rather mundane and sometimes even repetitive, especially for ones that require you to collect plants that only spawn so much per day, so you're going to need to make multiple trips. But what I really loved about the side quests was how much more I got to learn about these characters, especially Sol and Dom's side quests, where Sol's ready to settle down and find a place to stay, while Dom is still in love with exploring the world and always being on the go. Plus your dialogue options help shape the way Bryn interacts with the other party members. They don't change the outcome or anything, but they affect how Bryn speaks to him. And since you get to play messenger going back and forth trying to convince both of them that they're just being dumb and should talk like adults, it's fun to be mean Bryn sometimes. Plus some of these side quests have really cool rewards that I'm not going to spoil for you, but you should probably do them anyway. Now after rolling credits, I still have a few side quests that I haven't completed yet, and I don't know if they're going to unlock something extra for me or not. But I know there's stuff I've seen in the trailers that I've not witnessed in the game yet, and I just can't be the guy who doesn't take the time to find out what that's about. So once you're done here, I gotta get back to some side questing. So let's wrap up this review, shall we? So something that I haven't mentioned yet is that I was a part of the playtest for Eternal Strands way back in July of 2024. I got to play a smaller build of the game and even sit down with the developers and talk about my thoughts and expectations for Eternal Strands. Now I can't remember what it was exactly that I said, but there was this moment where I was mentioning how I discovered an interesting gameplay mechanic, and I watched one of the developers give this little fist pump of excitement as he found out that someone understood his vision for the game. And from both that small snippet of gameplay and getting to see the passion behind the developers that I got to speak with, I knew the team at Yellowbird Games was going to have something special on their hands. And thankfully, I was right. As I mentioned at the top of the video, I got my key for Eternal Strands a few days before Christmas, meaning that I've had this game for a little over a month now, and I played all holiday break. I've even been struggling to play other games because I don't want to put this one down. being able to enter battles with my own desired kit of spells and weapons, facing off against some of the coolest boss designs that I've seen in an indie game yet, and a compelling story filled with charming characters that felt like my own family, even when they were annoying to be around, is the perfect combination to create an epic beginning of the year indie banger. I've been loving my time with Eternal Strands, and only wish I was able to receive a console version so I could focus on that for my platinum. Luckily, I just got my PlayStation 5 key the other day, so I'm excited to say I'm already on my second playthrough. Sorry other games, I've got an obsession. And if you're interested in checking out Eternal Strands for yourself, the game will be releasing on January 28th for Steam, Epic Game Store, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S. Plus, if you have Game Pass, you're going to be able to play it on there day one as well. Which means I might have to cancel my subscription because I cannot be starting a cloud save playthrough on my phone or I will literally never get anything else done. Once again, I got to give a huge shout out to Yellowbird Games for setting me up with the game ahead of time so I could review it for you today. Eternal Strands is their debut title, so let's make this game an absolute success and show it all the love that we can. And a great way to do that, obviously, is buying the game, but also liking this video so it shows up on more people's video feeds. And then they also get suckered into listening to me ramble about video games for a while. If you want to hear more indie game reviews, I'll be sure to link a playlist at the end of the video, or something else that YouTube thinks you're going to be into. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.